Barnett from the investlocalbook.com blog site and the Dave Barnett YouTube channel, where I talk about buying and selling businesses and small business management and investing in business and anything else that viewers want to ask about. The other day I had a new connection on LinkedIn, CGA from the Toronto area named Hia Pasha, and she asked me a very simple question: why do I think that small businesses fail? And I gave her an answer, and then she replied, I asked her the same question, and she gave me a bunch of things. And I thought, wow, if we get 12 of these, we could have a Christmas-themed video. So I invited Hia on with me today. And Hia, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, David. It was awesome connecting with you, and I'm very glad to be here.
Great. Well, you've always worked in big businesses, and you also work with small businesses, and you help them with a lot of the things that CGAs do: forecasting, budgeting, tax issues, and things like that. And you've had experience with quite a few small businesses, and I could tell from the list of things that you had sent me that you've seen some pretty disastrous things happen. And maybe we can explore some of those things together. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And yes, I do, as a CPA, I do have experience with large organizations and small businesses, but there are certain themes within the small business industry where, you're able to see that on an ongoing basis. So sure, let's explore them.
All right. So we have 12 items. So it's the 12 days of small business mismanagement to give us our holiday theme. And the first one that we have on the list is a lack of strategic direction. I'm surprised to hear that you think that most small businesses don't have like a strategic plan in place.
So a strategic plan is extremely important for creating a strong, growing, and profitable business. It's your roadmap for implementing, achieving your vision. And basically, if you don't have that, for the next 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, you're technically just focused on doing day-to-day operations and not necessarily in tune with why you even started working in the small business to begin with.
I agree with you. Everyone's so busy doing the work that if you think of an organizational structure in a business, they're busy down at the bottom level doing the work, serving the customers, that they don't actually take time aside to think about what those higher up people in a big company would be doing, which is like thinking about the future, planning ahead, making goals and things for the organization. When I was a business broker, I used to see this all the time. You'd see that garage with one guy who eventually hires 3 guys, and then he gets stuck for 20 years and never grows beyond that. And somebody would buy that business who came from a larger organization, and one of the first things they would do is they would start to implement policies and procedures, and which are further on our list, of course. But they would have that vision of, if I'm going to buy this business, I want to make it into something more valuable that I can make more money with, and then sell for more money down the road.
That's right. I mean, and I see that all the time. I find that people just don't focus on their North Star, really. And if they don't have a plan or a bridge between where they are today and where they want to be, it sort of cascades into a lot bigger issues. And yes, when you're, thinking about selling your business or doing or growing or anything other that sort of is a shift in your strategic direction, it's not as fluid and it doesn't flow as naturally.
Yeah. Well, thinking about the future, the second day of business mismanagement that we have is not understanding cash flow. And this one is actually kind of near and dear to me because a couple of years ago, when I first started doing one-on-one consulting with business owners and buying and selling and helping them better manage their businesses, I was actually referred to a client in the southern U.S. who was trying to get a loan, and she wanted my help to get a loan. And when I explored what she was doing, she was in a therapy trade where she was serving clients and then she was billing insurance companies. And the insurance companies were sometimes taking 45 to 60 days to pay her, but she was paying her therapists every 2 weeks like normal employees. And as she was running short of cash, she thought that the solution to that was to grow and gain more clients. And I helped her realize that the more she sold, the more money she was actually going to have to invest in receivables. And I mean, you must see this kind of thing all the time where people don't understand that gap between revenue and expenses, and they actually dig themselves a bigger hole.
Yeah, that's definitely true. They don't understand that it's basically in proportion. To build your revenue, you have to make investments. And what I also find is that small business owners don't necessarily have separate accounts or cards for business, and the lines between personal and business expenses are very blurred. Small business owners may have a fair idea of the overall expenses, but they don't necessarily understand the impact of cash flow and cash management. So then the question of having a substantial cash reserve usually takes a backseat. And I'll give you an example. Your cell phone bill, which you get every month, is basically based on your usage of prior months. So let's say it's $60. So
Yeah.
therefore, you should have a cash reserve of, let's say, 120 in terms of your liquid cash, since you know that you will get a bill for the phone for this coming month. So if you decide to cancel your services, what are the termination fees? And I find that small business owners don't necessarily have the foresight to do that. Some are very on top of it, but there's a definite link between your cash flow, your cash management, and growing your business. They're all interlinked.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the third thing that we have on the 12 days of small business mismanagement is not actually charting out the workflow of the business. And you're talking about understanding potential or hidden costs, liabilities that are accruing that people aren't quite aware of. Things like the fact that you already owe the cell phone company for a couple months of service, even though your bill may be current, you still owe them for what's happening today, right? And a lot of the times these deferred liabilities or accruing liabilities really surprise people when they get a cash flow bump. So when I help a lot of people, one of the things that we do is we chart out the workflow of the business step by step to try to get an understanding of the money flowing from procurement to payment, like all the way through. Have you run into any people that have had any particular bad stories or experience because they don't understand exactly what's going on in their business?
So business owners believe that they know their business and everything about it, and which is substantial because that's where, they started at grassroots level. But what happens when you trust your employee, or when your employee that you trust leaves, right? Do you train the new employee on your own time? And if not, who does? And what does that have to do, what happens to your business, right? Or imagine the stress of having the right person, knowing the ins and outs of your business, and then the person moving on to a more lucrative opportunity, right? So these are things that you don't consider when you're running a small business. Like, what is the documentation? And big organizations are big on that, right? There's a process document for almost anything and everything, and it makes sense because you want that continuity within your organization. I used to know of this husband and wife. They used to operate a small business, and the wife was very good at back office administrative kind of tasks, whereas the husband was more client facing. And after suffering from terminal illness, the wife passed on. It took 3 years for the business to get back to where it was, simply because the husband had no desire or time or the willingness to take on those back office processes, right? So that's a big thing.
Well, it leads right into number 4, which we had listed, which is a lack of attention to administrative tasks. And we had talked a little bit about the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber, but what Gerber says is that the majority of people who start businesses are actually the technicians, and they know how to do the work. So the auto mechanic knows how to fix cars, the roofer knows how to install shingles, but they bring that trade to the business, and they know how to satisfy the customer, and they ignore, in a lot of respect, all that back office stuff. Just like you said, I still know people that scramble, at the end of the year with boxfuls of paper receipts and things. And I can't imagine the burden that it would place ultimately on whoever has to try to sort that problem out.
Yeah, that's a big burden because, as you said, business owners love what they do, and they are not necessarily the biggest fans of doing administrative duties. So there have been times when we've literally people have walked in with boxes of just receipts and bills and just left it on my desk, and then we have to go back and sort it through. But again, my 2 cents to that would be focus on what you do best, and whatever you cannot do, find somebody who can help you with that, because at the end of the day, your business will get impacted. It's just, it's a snowball impact, right?
Yeah. And from my point of view, the way that I run my business and the way that I help other people run theirs, people often say, what number should we be tracking? What should we be looking at every month? And I always have to say, the first thing we have to do is make sure that the chart of accounts is set up properly on our income statement, and make sure that the bank statement is reconciled as early in the month as we can, so we can actually look at the prior month and make sure that our gross margin is on target. If you're not actually keeping track of your books every month, things can really slip out of whack, and then you're only going to find out from your accountant, maybe 3 months after your year end, that your performance has been slipping in the prior year. It takes so long for people to adjust because the data is so late by that point.
Yeah, see, that's one of the biggest things. And even in big organizations, right, you need trends, you need tracking, you need to see where your business is going. And instead of just looking at things retroactively, you almost have to use your financials and look at it proactively and run your business thereon, right? So that's why we have budgets, and that's why we have forecasts, and that's why it makes so much sense to have those.
Okay. So now the next few days of business mismanagement on our list are about HR stuff. And, people are people, everyone's a character, everyone's a little bit different, but this next one made me chuckle a little bit. So day number 5 of business mismanagement is acting like a princess or a prince. And we put the point here that workers are not subjects. So it sounds like you've had experience with running into some pretty big personalities.
That's right. The biggest challenge of hiring people in small businesses is not having sufficient funds. So more often than not, small businesses pay less than what the market pays. And then this is further complicated by lack of growth opportunities within the business. So unless an employee absolutely believes in your vision or has a desire or a need that that can only be fulfilled by working for you, there's a good chance that there is going to be employee turnover. So how do you keep people? How do you really motivate them? So in my opinion, the most important motivation for people is to treat them with respect and to treat them with kindness, and not underestimate what kindness can do and how far that can go. So for this, in the spirit of the holiday season, give them that Christmas gift, and don't be stingy on the Christmas party.
It's true.
Exactly. So you have the right people and your business will thrive.
So, okay, so we have to treat the employees well. We can't be too, and I actually heard of a problem in a business here locally where the business owner actually said to employees that the business hadn't been performing that well, and so they had to scale back their year-end bonuses. And then he went and bought a new car, a new Cadillac. And regardless of whether he leased it or financed it over 10 years, the message that sent to the employees was simply that, well, of course I couldn't give you your bonus. I had to use the money to buy my new car, right? And they all just felt in their minds that they had just been knocked down a couple pegs. And nobody likes to come into work feeling that they're not valued, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. It happens more often than we like to believe.
Yeah. So item number 6, or day number 6, is simply no job descriptions. So you've got a bunch of people in here, and maybe we don't have our systems properly charted out, and then we get people in here with no job descriptions. And at the end of the day, you know what that means. It means that something is going to be missed, and we don't know whose job it was necessarily and who to hold accountable.
Right. So who is accountable for what? And when you work in a small business, the expectation is that you will roll with the punches and wear different hats. And that works great for people who, don't mind that. But it's an absolute disaster for people who think who like more structure and boundaries to their days, right? So work responsibilities are not clearly outlined and people step over each other's toes, and that causes a whole bunch of animosity between people. In one case, a business owner was absolutely livid when one of his staff members actually reached out to the client to let them know that their order was, ready to be picked up. And she thought she was being proactive and she was taking initiative. But the business owner was livid because he didn't appreciate his staff having that face time with the client, right? So it's you, when you're running a small operation, those boundaries need to be set.
Well, it's interesting you talk about boundaries being set between different people in the business, because our day of mismanagement number 7, of course, is hiring family. And,
right.
You can imagine the kinds of problems that come from that.
Right. So I'll give you an example. So a small business operating a franchise restaurant. So the husband, the wife, the children's spouses, and you name it, was working in that organization. And then things started getting ugly. So guess who took the biggest impact? The business did, right? So my 2 cents would be that hire family when you need to, but look for alternatives and outsource. Have a plan.
Well, it's interesting because I've often dealt with a lot of husband and wife teams. And then when children get old enough, there's this, it almost seems like a natural thing, almost like if you think back to the days of the family farm. 150 years ago, most people in North America lived on a family farm where everyone shared the duties and everyone worked together. And small businesses, in a lot of respect, are almost like those family farms. Everybody's busy doing something to bring in income to the family. But what I always like to point out to people is that from the family finance point of view, it's incredibly risky, because now there's no income diversification for the family unit. Whereas if, one of the partners is operating a small business and the other person, even if it's a different small business where they have a job somewhere else, their family finances are now on a more solid footing because they've just diversified that income stream.
Right, and that's a great strategy, right? You have a steady stream of income coming in, and then you do what you need to do on the side. So you're diversified, your risk is diversified, and it just makes more business sense. Don't have all your eggs in one basket, right? As much as that is a cliche, it really is still applicable.
Well, it's interesting because we're talking about no job descriptions and hiring family, and family sometimes gets hired whether or not they're specifically qualified for a certain role. Our day number 8 of small business mismanagement is not bringing in experts when we need them. I'm thinking that perhaps experts like a CPA.
That's right. Why not? And that's right? Like in large organizations, you have a department for everything and anything. You've got HR, finance, quality, procurement, etc. And the basic premise is that not everybody is good at everything, right? So as a small business owner, recognize what your strengths are and what you're bringing to the table, and find people or resources that can complement your weakness. It may cost you financially in the present time, but in the long run, you will reap great benefits in terms of efficiencies, in terms of economies of scale. So it's a smart business decision.
It's interesting because I'm on a telephone consulting platform called clarity.fm, and people reach out to me from all over the world, and a lot of them are doing transactions where they're trying to buy a business or sell a business, where they have a partnership issue, where they're trying to figure out what their business might be worth. And they'll spend an incredible amount of time doing research online, trying to find articles and free resources, or they'll even read books. And then they'll reach out to me, and I've had so many people say this to me. They'll spend 30 minutes on the phone with me and then say, oh my goodness, you just got us probably weeks ahead in this process, simply by the fact that you have your experience and you know what people like us have been through and where we're headed. And I've often told people, if you bring in the right person, not only are you going to, if you value your time at all, you have to bring in experts, because they're going to be able to do things in 1/10 of the time that a do-it-yourselfer is going to be able to figure out. And sorry, I've led into the next thing, because that's number 9 on our list of small business mismanagement, is do-it-yourself brain fog.
Right, and that's the misconception that most small business owners have. They feel that they can do anything and everything and they're absolutely indispensable. But unless you're disciplined and are extraordinary at managing your priorities, it's a pivotal myth, right? You can't do everything for yourself and you can't be everything to everybody. So make choices, hire the right people, it'll save you time, it'll save you money, and again, it's better for business.
So the next two items that we have on our 12 days of business mismanagement made me chuckle a little bit because I haven't quite seen these, I think, maybe as often as you have. And it's funny because you've seen a lot of businesses get into trouble over the course of time that you've been working with them, right? So you've seen like a decline in the business and numbers working more poorly. I saw a lot of businesses in trouble when I had my business brokerage office, because what would happen is people would get into such a dire position that they would then come in and see me and they would say, hey, I need to sell my business and I really don't care what I get for it as long as all my debts are paid. So, and quite often, unfortunately, is I would look at the performance of their business and I would have to say, look, I don't think you need a business broker. What you actually need is an auctioneer and then maybe a trustee, to look at some kind of insolvency process, because things had gotten to that point where things were so bad. But so item number 10 of our 12 days of small business mismanagement is loaning money to family.
And
tell me about that.
Yeah, so loaning money to family and friends. So as a small business owner, you're somewhat of a role model. If you're the only person within your family who has a small business, people have different expectations of you, right? So I'll give you an example. A small business owner in the retail industry, thought himself to be a savior of the world and gave till there was nothing else to give. So, my 2 cents to that would be there for your family and friends. No doubt about that. We all need to be there for each other, but be smart about it. Learn to differentiate between people who are just taking you for a ride. And again, back to your point, it does lead to having business problems, right? You keep on dipping into your shareholders' equity. It's not an endless reservoir.
Well, that's right. And of course, I can't, of course, let this go by without saying, if you're going to make a private loan, especially to someone who's in business, then of course you have to read my 2014 bestseller, which is Investable.
I'm going to look at that as soon as I get off this phone.
Thank you. That's great. Day number 11, and this was a shocker to me because I honestly didn't think that this happened as much as you've since told me that it does. But day number 11 of small business mismanagement is bullying the accountant. When I saw this, I was like, geez, I've never thought to do that tactic myself. I've probably left so much money in the tax man's hands. Why haven't I been bullying my accountant more? Tell me about people who've been bullying you. What's going on?
When I wrote that, I actually took a step back and chuckled too, because, it sounds really horrible. But yeah, you get all kinds of people trying to pull all kinds of stuff. And the biggest one is it tax deductible? Can I lower my expenses? How do I lower my taxes? And you know what? There are things that you can legitimately do to lower your taxes, but not everything is tax deductible. And you can't just get invoices to soup up your expenses from aunts and uncles and neighbors, and you just can't do that, right? So there is a very fine line between what, we're not here as accountants, we're not here in the business of cover up your shady, right? So don't try and pull a fast one.
Well, okay, so this begs a question to me, is if an accountant knew that somebody was trying to hand over, let's say receipts, okay, that weren't in fact the business's receipts, that they were trying to artificially inflate their expenses to reduce their income. If the accountant knew that and then processed the paperwork from the tax return, and then there was subsequently an audit that found that problem, would the accountant be culpable in some way? Like, would they not be putting themselves in danger by doing that for someone?
Absolutely. And that's where ethics training comes into place. And that's where, you have to be a member of your of the CPA society, which means that you have to adhere to all the standards and ethics of the profession. So if somebody is doing that, then unknowingly doing that, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, it happens, but if you're knowingly doing something, then you are jeopardizing your license, you are jeopardizing your reputation, and it's a small world, like it's a very small world for accountants.
Yeah, reputations, in this day and age especially, I advise people when I sometimes get clients who want to sell their business and they want a little bit of advice from me, but then ultimately decide that they want to use a local business broker. And one of the things that I often say to them is to investigate the business broker by looking at what I call orbiting professionals. And now that LinkedIn exists, this has never been easier. So someone can go on to LinkedIn, find a professional that they want to work with, and then literally see who that person is connected to. And then, if they're a premium member of LinkedIn, they can start sending messages to these strangers and say, look, I'm thinking about doing business with this person you're connected to. Could I, have a brief phone call with you or whatnot? It's never been easier to investigate people than it is now, if only people will invest the time to actually look and to talk to people.
That's right. And you know what, even when you're as a job hunter, right, if you're looking to work in an organization, you do your research, you figure out, what their financial statements say, what is their sustainability plan, etc. And you do all your research. And I think in today's day and age, it's very, very transparent. And it's up to you to do your due diligence. And if you're not doing that, then, then shame on you.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end now. So this is the 12th day of small business mismanagement. And our item number 12 is ignoring or simply having no interest in key performance indicators. And we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about reconciling our financials every month. Do you tell me what you think about this one?
So the first question is performance indicators. Why? What the hell is that? And why on earth do I need it? And to be concise, we don't have what you can't measure, and what you can't measure doesn't exist. And you can't improve on something that you aren't measuring. So key performance indicators are basically your industry-specific performance measurements, which is also known as benchmarking. And it also relates to, your key financial ratios, which could be your working capital, your debt to equity, etc. So unless and until you know and you absolutely mindfully measure those, you can't improve anything. Not a lot of small businesses have the discipline or the rigor to do so, but once you have a system in place, it's pretty easy to manage and track to these performance indicators.
Yeah, and for me, and I've done videos about this in the past, for me, the number one thing when I work with clients on any kind of mentoring basis, after we've done the Band-Aid solution, so we've addressed any of the crises, the next thing that I always try to tackle is gross margin, because I find that a lot of people don't focus on that number. And what I find with a lot of small businesses is that their chart of accounts isn't necessarily set up correctly. So I'll give you an example. A service company with administrative staff, and maybe their cost of goods sold is simply their inputs, but they've got the direct labor and the administrative labor all mixed together in one salary line. And so they're never able to know when they analyze their month if they actually were able to get their target gross margin overall on average for all the clients that they serve. And until they sort that out and separate their people and get the direct labor separated from the administrative, for example, and there's all kinds of other examples, even vehicle usage and stuff like that, or shipping and freight can in some industries be divided between the two. Until they get it sorted out, they don't really know if a certain month they've made good money or hit their targets or not, especially if their purchasing mismatches the calendar month and they don't take the time to do accruals with that either.
That's right. Or even setting up prepaids, right, to reflect 1/12 of your expenses. That's another thing. So you don't do your accruals, you don't do your prepaids. You have no idea about what goes into your cost of goods sold. What really is that, right? And if you don't know that, you're assuming you would have a target growth percentage, right? But what if you don't even know that? Then what are you matching to? What's your aim? right? So it's having those key things, and then sort of managing your day-to-day operations to maximize those key performance indicators, and then also knowing what you're doing wrong, right? So it's not necessarily a reactive mode, it's more proactive. It's taking, a different view at running your business.
I think the key expression is to say it's managing a business instead of just working in it.
That's right. I agree with.
Yeah. All right. Well, Hia, thank you very much for taking the time to join me on this call and going through the 12 days of small business management. I know it'll be a fun video for everyone in my blog and email list and people who subscribe to my YouTube channel. And for people who would like to get in touch with you, and you're in the Greater Toronto area, do you work with people all over?
Oh, that's right, I do. And with the softwares that we have, it's very easy to manage things without necessarily being there. So if anybody is looking to get a hold of me, I do have my website. It's Heer, that's Heer, last name Pasha, PASHA.ca. So thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I'm glad we connected.
Well, awesome. I'm really happy that we connected too. And I'll put a link to your website in the show notes down below for anyone who's watching on YouTube. And don't forget, everyone, click the subscribe button so you'll never miss any of the videos on this channel. And if you go over to my blog site at investlocalbook.com or davidcbarnett.com, you can sign up to my email list. And email subscribers get to see the videos 3 days before they're released publicly. So you're always going to be the first ones in the know. And with that, I'll wish you a happy holidays, Hia. It was great to meet you, and thanks for joining us.
Happy holidays. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.